say the violent incidents show the need for additional prison space to house violent offenders. But some people believe these prison assaults have been exaggerated as a political ploy.
It looks very strange that at this particular time that these incidents are being used to call for new jail cells, new prison cells, and at the time that Governor Pataki's proposal is in trouble.
The governor's proposal includes 1,100 more cells to lock violent inmates up in disciplinary housing. The incidents over the weekend at Coxsackie just reaffirm the need for that kind of housing.
The governor's proposal would cost taxpayers about $800 million to build new prisons and about $200 million to operate them each year.
The ruling by administrative law judge comes in the wake of an ugly scene last year when death penalty protesters confronted the father of a murder victim in court. As a result of that incident, a Supreme Court justice has now banned all indoor courthouse protests. One of those present during that demonstration questions whether the ruling will hold up.
I'm surprised. I'm still not sure whether the judge can impose such a restriction, such a blanket restriction. Just not sure what.
Alice Green was among a group of protesters who engaged in a shouting match with 74-year-old John Casero, whose cab driver's son was murdered execution style. The demonstrators were angered by Casero's call for the death penalty. The protest ban will apply not only in Albany, but in county courts throughout the capital region.
Death penalty protests last year.
No one shall kill. I'd like to see you have that sign if it was your son. That's what I want to see.
This was the scene at the Albany County Courthouse when the father of a murdered cab driver called for the death penalty in the case. Protesters confronted him in the hallway outside of the court, but some activists think banning all protests is going too far.
I'm not aware of any other problems that have existed in the county. So I think to go to the step of actually prohibiting demonstrations, in a blanket kind of way, would be an overreaction.
The ban on courthouse protest is for Albany, Rensselaer, Columbia, Schoharie.
Criminal jury set Simpson free. Many say race relations have been strained. Now that a mostly white jury has held him responsible, some of the same concerns are being raised. It had community activists talking too. Alice Green of Albany's Center for Law and Justice says the trial has driven a wedge between blacks and whites.
To a great extent, it was revenge. I don't think it's solved anything. I don't think anyone feels better.
Green took her frustrations public today. A year after she challenged the governor on his pro-death penalty stance, she was back on the attack with Lieutenant Governor Betsy McCoy Ross. Green disrupted the Martin Luther King Day proceedings in Albany to air her concerns that the Pataki administration policies were
Say no to a budget of injustice. We cannot work together when the governor's budget is going to starve children.
Well, Dr. Alice Green joins us live tonight from our Albany News Center to talk more about this. And Dr. Green, thank you very much for joining us. It seems to me, at least, and I'd really like you to comment on this first, as if, in a sense, you are not willing any longer to just try and work with or within the system. Is that a fair assessment of perhaps this vocal outcry today?
Well, I think I'm simply following the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King, who asked us to protest injustice anywhere we found it. And I certainly believe that the governor's budget is a form of injustice, and that was what I was trying to do, was to call that to the public's attention.
Some might argue that these loud outcries in a public situation perhaps show either a lack of respect for the state leaders or are not appropriate in that forum. How would you answer that?
Well, I thought it was very appropriate. I think, if anything, the governor has shown disrespect for African Americans and poor people by proposing a budget that would actually devastate our communities.
How frustrated are you by what's going on, and are we seeing that come out because there has been a change in administration, since both times in the last year they've been involving the Republican administration?
Well, I certainly see a crisis in our African American community, so I'm extremely concerned about what will happen when the governor in his budget will reduce Medicaid, will put young children in adult prisons, will also cut people off welfare, especially children who will be born to parents who are already on welfare.
there seemed to be a great deal of support for what you were saying when you were allowed to address the crowd with the Lieutenant Governor today. How will you become empowered, do you think? Will you continue this tack, or is there a better, more successful direction for you to go in?
Well, I'm trying to encourage people, poor people and people in the African American community to become much more involved in the legislative process. I think they have to look at what's happening through the budget and through our legislators in terms of laws. So we
At the beginning of last week's Martin Luther King parade in Albany, Alice Green was there.
The governor has spoken already. Please join us and show us respect.
And at a similar celebration later that day, she was there again, disruptive, loud, and some would say out of order.
This is not the place nor the time for this foolishness.
Alice Green's tactics landed her an audience with the Lieutenant Governor today at the Capitol.
Yes, we had a great deal of common ground. We share a real commitment to helping children stay in school and succeed in school.
Sometimes in a crisis, you have to use a different ethic. And I think that's what we did.
It often happens that people feel they're not heard and want to be heard. And I was delighted that Dr. Green came to see me today.
Alice Green's road to social justice has often been paved with controversy, but this latest flap raises another important question. Should the Lieutenant Governor grant an audience with every heckler and every crusader that comes along?
That's the Lieutenant Governor if she wants to do that.
I prefer to look at the positive side of it rather than the negative side.
I don't expect everyone to do the same thing that I did, but I think we got our point across.
In other words, for now, the question will remain unanswered. Dan Levy, News 10, reporting to you from the state capitol.
Now, both women say the most important thing they have in common is their concern for children. The Lieutenant Governor has agreed to visit Dr. Green's office to observe firsthand the projects she's involved with.
Times Union columnist Fred LeBrun says Alice Green and Betsy McCoy Ross should both be congratulated for what they've done. Fred has one man's opinion.
There's no question that Alice Green has a pushy way about her. She talked Betsy McCoy, our Lieutenant Governor, into...
Its most powerful Republican. The newspaper says the Lieutenant Governor has told several friends about her ambitions. Her plans to run against Senator D'Amato in the Republican primary in 1998 should D'Amato run for re-election. Now, the news in a program for young kids run by Alice Green, whom you might remember heckled the Lieutenant Governor on Martin Luther King Day. Winding up with this promised appearance by the Lieutenant Governor as the two of them mended fences. Now, one very highly placed Republican source told me this afternoon that he doubts highly that the Lieutenant Governor would think about challenging the powerful D'Amato. He says the more
political rumors. And Betsy McCoy Ross says reports that she'll challenge Senator Al D'Amato are nothing but unfounded rumors.
No, I am not running against Senator D'Amato in 1998. The New York Post story this morning really surprised me. The rumor is entirely unfounded. It is simply not true.
The senator had promised this would be his last term anyway, but McCoy Ross says she's not looking past her current term in office. McCoy Ross visited Albany South End today to speak to young graduates of a crime prevention and empowerment program. Dr. Alice Green invited the Lieutenant Governor to the event. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Green interrupted McCoy Ross's speech during a Martin Luther King Day celebration. It was a much more cordial scene today. In fact, this event is a direct result of a subsequent meeting between the two women.
And so I think this will be helpful to her so that she'll get an opportunity to see, what's going on at the Public Housing Authority, in a low-income community, and what some of the issues and problems are.
And Dr. Green says that there is no rift with the administration, that her actions a couple of weeks back were not personal.
And she didn't indicate she's running against Alphonse D'Amato either.
She did not, no.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
The death penalty, but an accused killer in Albany County does. It is the first capital case in the Capital District, and already there are cries of racism. Alan Johnson of New York City had a tear streaming down his face after he learned that the DA is seeking the death penalty against him. He is charged with viciously stabbing and beating Anthony Ingoldsby in his Albany apartment last July. Ingoldsby was not his intended victim. His roommate was, to settle a drug debt. In an angry exchange with the DA, Alice Green of the Center for Law and Justice claimed this is a racist case because Johnson is black, the victim is white.
It sounds kind of silly at first, but when you think about it,
This is what's alleged here is an everyday kind of murder.
He knew that the person was the wrong person, that he knew he was killing an innocent victim, and that he killed him anyway to make a point.
As to the charge of race, the prosecutor says the only race involved is the human race. We will have much more on this local death penalty case and the wider issue later on News Center 6:30.
Albany News Chief Judy Sanders reports on the first death penalty case in Albany County and how race is already becoming a major issue.
Mr. Johnson, why are you crying? Alan Johnson didn't say anything, but he did have a tear streaming down his cheek after finding out the Albany County DA would seek the death penalty against him for the July murder of Anthony Inglesby.
He's crying because he's charged with a capital offense and he knows that the government wants to kill him.
You said that you would not seek the death penalty.
There were angry words exchanged between the DA and Alice Green of the Center for Law and Justice, who claims this is a racist case.
I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he happens to be black and the victim happens to be white.
Inglesby was not the intended target. His roommate was to settle a drug debt, but police say he was beaten and stabbed over 30 times anyway.
This is not alleged to be a case of mistaken identity. It's alleged that Mr. Johnson knew very well that this was not the person that he was after and that he killed him anyway.
Inglesby's parents were in court, and his father says Johnson is a good candidate for the death penalty.
I have no further comment.
Mr. Greenberg, I think
The DA says Johnson, who's from New York City, has a long criminal record and allegedly slashed a suspected informant in the county jail to keep him from testifying. Judy Sanders, News Center 630, Albany.
Both those murder cases are making news in part because of the way the death penalty was used. In the Maurer murder case, it became a tool. In the case against Alan Johnson, the race card is being called.
Inglesby, allegedly stabbing him 17 times. Johnson was in court today. Outside the courtroom, charges that race is a factor in seeking the ultimate penalty.
It plays a big role in the whole criminal justice system, and especially in cases of capital punishment. We see a disproportionate number of those who are on death row who happen to be African American, and especially those whose victims happen to be white.
Really, there's not a whole lot to respond to, just to say that the only race that played a part in this case is the human race, and Tony Inglesby was a member of the human race, and that's all I have to say.
An alleged accomplice is expected to testify against Johnson when the case goes to trial.
King Memorial in Lincoln Park to continue paying tribute to the slain civil rights leader. The celebration here at Lincoln Park was not a harmonious coming together, but rather two different rallies going on at the same time.
I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna...
Local civil rights activist Alice Green said she had a permit to use the site for her own People's Celebration. In the past, she's used these events to protest Governor Pataki's budget and its impact on the poor. Last year, Green shouted down the lieutenant governor during a program at the convention center.
Please join us.
And the year before, told the governor he was not welcome at the head of the King Parade.
This is unfortunate because Martin Luther King was about unity, and they didn't want me as part of this celebration.
In the end, both groups got to honor King's legacy in their own way. Reporting to you, Robin Schwartz, News 10.
This was the 12th annual state celebration of Martin Luther King's birthday. He would have been 68 years old.
The 12th annual New York State observance of the Martin Luther King holiday began with a memorial service at the Empire Plaza. Prior to his accident, Governor Pataki spoke at the ceremony.
And let us today rededicate ourselves to see that that dream comes true, to see that we do reach that mountaintop, to see that the promised land comes a step closer to reality here in Albany.
After the memorial, marchers headed for the King Monument in Lincoln Park for a wreath-laying ceremony.
Dr. King stood for many great things, and we must practice those ideals even today. And for us to be out here and to brave these temperatures is symbolic of what he did. And if I could come out here for 15 minutes in the cold, it says millions, it says volume.
But not everyone at the park was there for the state's observance. Local activist Alice Green held a protest rally where speakers talked about the commercialization of King's image.
Dr. King indeed had a dream, and he did. And that dream was a dream of freedom and of justice and of equality for all men, and the things that are being done in his name make mockery of the man and all that he stood for.
But despite the division at the park, members of 2 youth groups took advantage of the day to paint a wall mural at Albany's Neighborhood Resource Center.
State Plaza this morning with groups singing the praises of Dr. King. Then the crowd marched to the King Memorial in Albany's Lincoln Park, where it ran into a separate group led by local civil rights activist Alice Green, protesting Governor Pataki's budget. And it's this clash of sorts that Times Union columnist Fred LeBrun is talking about tonight.
Fred says it does not do much for racial harmony. Tonight, Fred has one man's opinion.
Earlier in the day, William Jefferson Clinton was inaugurated for his 2nd term, and during the course of his wonderful he talked about bringing the races together, about racial harmony, about the FDR legacy of the New Deal yielding to the JFK New Frontier, to his new promise, the new promise of the 21st century. And I'm a sap for those brotherhood speeches. I believe in them. I find them stirring, visionary. But then there's the reality that's like a slap of a cold Albany day. Today we had, in the name of Martin